Hey folks, welcome back to this is part 3 of our program to create a memory game or a version of a memory game. In the first stage we just had a look at the planning and the design of our application. Second stage we created downloaded our starting code and we created the beginnings of our JavaScript file where we've set up an area for global variables. Don't have any yet, but we'll have some. Set up our array with all of our images stored in it, and a variable for them to figure out how many matches there were. Obviously, if there's 12 elements in our array, we need to have pairs of cards, so there's going to be 6 matches in our implementation at the moment. And set up our functions that we decided we had in our top level design, our choose function, our check function, and our shuffle function. So in this version, in this part of our process, we're going to look at the choose function. So the function that responds when the user clicks one of our cards on our interface. So what happens? Well, we've chosen a card. What do we need to do there? So having a look at some pseudocode to tell us what we need to do. Our choose function is going to make use of a variable called card, which is going to get passed to it ultimately from HTML. So it's actually going to get passed to it from the image that was chosen. When we have a bunch of images in HTML, if I just zoom out so that we can see those properly, when we have a bunch of images in a web page like we have here, 12 of them, they actually load into an array, a node array it's called. And they act like a normal array where each one gets a zero-based index value. So this first one's going to be 0, and then that one's 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way up to 11. So that's what's going to happen with those, and that's going to get passed from HTML ultimately into our choose function, so we will know which one of these was actually clicked on, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So that's how we're going to recognize that happens. Because we need to select 2 cards, we're going to use a simple if block to detect have 2 choices been made, have 2 cards been clicked on. If they haven't, then we don't want to do anything. We want the player to be allowed to continue. But if we have made a couple of choices, then we want some things to start to happen. We want to store the index value of our first card in a variable called first choice, which is then going to allow us to show the correct corresponding image to that from our array. And we're going to set the value of picks to 1 because obviously that is one selection made. And then we want to, what are we going to do if they've made a second selection? Well, we set our value of picks to 2 because 2 choices have been made. Do a similar thing. Store the index of the second card in a second choice array so that we can choose the correct image from our images array to display for that card. And then we're going to set a timer. We're going to set a timer to call the check function, which is the next function we'll look at, in 1 second's time. So we want to allow a little bit of time with the cards turned over for us to be able to look at them before we want the program to go on and do anything. So we're going to set a timer to wait 1 second before the check function gets called. So implementing that in our JavaScript code then, we're sitting inside of our choose card function. Okay, so our choose function from our first if statement over here just looks like this. If 2 choices have been made, in other words, the player has clicked on 2 cards, then we don't want anything to happen. We actually just want to return and stop the program and allow it to continue on. I forgot to enter our card variable into here, so we will see what that's doing a little bit later on and where that's coming from. But we need choose card. So if picks are 2, do nothing, the player stops because they've obviously got to, that's just there to prevent them choosing a third card. So they won't be able to go click, click, click and quickly turn over 3 cards. We want to prevent that from happening. So picks have been 2, then that's what's going to happen. Our next bit of code we'll look at, so what happens if, they've made their first pick. So if picks is 0, it means they haven't made any choices yet at all. So they've made their first click, they've clicked on one card. We need to identify which card it was that was selected. So we're going to use a variable called first choice for that. So that's actually going to need to be a global variable. So I'm going to declare that as var first choice in my global variables section. Pix was another one too, by the way, that I'm going to need to declare as a global variable. So I'm going to declare that as a global variable as I go. So if my pix is equal to 0, I haven't clicked on a card yet. This is my first click. First choice is equal to the index of the card that was chosen. So if it was this one, for instance, the index value of that card, so that I can then go and look in my images card array. Images.card.source is the images array from HTML. So when I've got a bunch of images in a HTML page, they actually create for themselves an array of images. Images card is the index of the one that was clicked on, and I want to set the source to be equivalent to the card index from my faces array. So if it was index 0, 1, 2, 3, let's say this one that was clicked on, I want to set the value of card to 3, the index value of that card. And I want to go and find index value 3, and I want to load that particular image. And then I want to set the value of my pix variable to 1, so that that's one click that has been made, that's one selection that has been made. Outside of that, I then need to obviously close my curly brace for that particular section, and I want to do, if it's not 0 pix and it's not 1 pick, then I must have made not 2 picks, then I must have made my first pick. So picks must be equal to 2 now. So if picks are equal to 2, that means I have made I'm setting picks to 2 because this is my second pick. So I've made one pick, first pick up here, set picks to 1. I'm now setting picks to 2 because I've obviously made a second choice. I've clicked on a second card, and into my second choice variable, which I don't yet have. So I'm going to come up to my global variable section and add my variable for second choice. I want to set it to the index of the card that was clicked on, just like I did just above for the first choice variable. And I want to do the same thing as well. I want to pick up my images.source array, and I want to set the source of that card to match the index value of the chosen card from my array. And then I want to set a timer. So this is a variable for a timer. TID is for timer ID. That's going to be a global variable as well. So I'm going to create that variable as I go. And into my timer variable, I am starting a timer. When my timer runs every tick, I want to run the check function, which is this guy down here, which we haven't written yet, and I want that to run every second. So that's 1000 milliseconds. So it's going to wait for a second, and then it's going to call that function to give me time to look at the cards that have been chosen. So that is my choose function. So if I just make that a little bit larger so you can see the actual code, you need to take a second now, pause the video here if you need to, so that you can complete that function. Don't forget to add the variables into our global variable section that we need, but that is our choose card function, and that should run every time one of the cards is clicked on. Our next part to our series will look at the check function and what then happens and how do we go looking for matches that might have been made.